Hi, it's Dr. Turan, and you're listening to The Pop. The Pursuit of Peace podcast is brought to you by SP Consulting Group, where the mission is bringing your vision to life.
All right, and welcome back to The Pop. We are here again, back to always be on our pursuit of peace. And we have another guest here that I am so excited to introduce you to. But just as a reminder, we are following along this series of making sure that we are attending to the well-being of the ladies out there and really digging into those emotions, whether it's just emotional management or even some of those mood swings and what we need to do about that. And just despite hearing from whether it's our friends, our spouse, our partners, but just so that we can get to a place where we just shake off that superwoman outfit and know that we are absolutely fine with our emotions, but we need to know how to work with them, right? Let's take the pressure off. So we are here with the founder of Power Emotions, Miss Allison Polson Brown, and she's here with us to help us dig into our emotions and finding some of those golden nuggets that are buried deep within those emotions that we could actually use. So welcome to the Pop Podcast, Miss Polson Brown.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is such a pleasure to have you here. We are just excited, and we're just going to jump right in there because there is a lot to be discussed in regards to emotions. So before we get going, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I have 5 kids, and I got into this whole emotion topic because the last 3 of my 5 pregnancies, I had prenatal depression. So I got depression during the pregnancy, and I had little toddlers running around every time, and it was incredibly difficult. And after each baby was born, the depression lifted, but after each episode of prenatal depression, I found that my emotional responses were more and more challenging to deal with. I had never particularly been a yeller, and I was starting to yell at my kids regularly. I was just having a hard time dealing with daily issues, and my emotions were all over the place. And I was like, you know what? I have to figure something out. What is going on with me? And so that's what brought me here.
Well, we are so excited because that's actually something that a lot of us deal with. I know I have a toddler. You might even hear him in the background from time to time during some of my podcasts. And we really want this to be where everyone can truly just take notes. Like, I'm always big on people taking notes while they're listening to the podcast, because we all go through this, whether you're a single mom, a mom that's married, it really doesn't even matter. Working through your emotions when kids are around can be super challenging. And I know that's something that, I struggle with at times. It's just like you said, getting to that point where you're able to understand your emotions so that you don't act out of character. So tell us a little bit more about that and how you would recommend our listeners just even start out with managing their emotions.
So what clicked for me, finally made the change for me, was understanding that my emotions were not the problem. I spent a lot of years thinking that the problem was that I got angry, and if I could stop from getting angry, then I could handle the situation. And when I finally realized that anger as an emotion, not as an action, we're going to kind of differentiate here. I'm not talking about yelling at your kids or whatever, but anger as an emotion is a natural and helpful response because anger gives you energy. And when you use that energy to solve the problem, not yell and hit and all of those negative sides, but to use that energy to solve the problem, then all of a sudden you can handle the hard things that before seemed too difficult. So it changes emotions from being the problem to being part of the solution.
And I truly agree with that because you can learn so much from your emotions. that it's actually when we are talking about emotional management through, for example, the skills of using emotional intelligence, where you're able to use the information that you gain from your emotions to better manage it, but also to better even interact with other people around you. And this is both at home and at work. So it works in either environment, right?
Absolutely. It's so helpful whenever you're working with another person to know what your emotions are doing and use them. So what I teach is a visualization method. I teach people that energy of anger that you feel building up. You can feel like heat or pressure, tense muscles when you're getting angry. You visualize that energy actually moves out of your body into a barrier around you, like a force field that keeps those other people's opinions off of you. So it doesn't matter what your coworker or the random lady at Target or your mother-in-law thinks of what you're doing, it can't hurt you. And when you use anger that way, it's so much more helpful instead of causing a problem.
Right, because a lot of times we don't notice the impact that our emotions are having on our reaction. And so it's like when you are taking that time to pause for a moment and truly think, okay, so what could I do about this? Or what's the best course of action? Or hold on, let me stop react in a way that I don't want to react. Then it's like, okay, I feel like I may not be as loose, or if I could say as impulsive as I thought. Like I actually can zone in and understand myself enough to know to manage my emotions. But a lot of people think, okay, I'm stressed out, I have anxiety, I'm frustrated. But the ultimate thing is it's not just the emotion and the reaction. It's understanding it so that it actually improves it. So it's not that, oh, your emotions are bad and don't try to show your emotions. I think it could possibly be a bit working against you, if I could say, if you don't actually attend to your emotions. Have you had people do that where they just try to bottle it in and not really address it and it actually backfires?
Absolutely. And that was me. I can tell you my own story from that one. I spent a long time because I told you after the depression, I was just on edge and I'd get upset and I didn't want to get upset. And so I tried to stop myself from feeling angry. And the way I did that was by withdrawing from the situation. So I wouldn't actually interact with my kids. I would bury myself in my phone or whatever distraction I could come up with, cleaning the kitchen, anything so I didn't interact with them so that I didn't get angry, which was not at all what I wanted out of motherhood. And so I had to learn to say, you know what? The anger is showing up for a reason. It's showing up because there's something that feels threatening about this situation.
Absolutely.
And when I'm aware of that and I say, okay, let's take care of the problem, instead of trying to ignore the problem, then I suddenly had all this ability to interact with my kids and be with them and enjoy them because I wasn't hiding from my problems anymore.
That's actually something, too, that when it comes down to relationships, how we notice that, you know, whether it's professional relationships or personal relationships, it's not a good idea to practice avoidance. You know, not even just for the blowout, but even for being your authentic self and being in a space where you can, for yourself, feel that you can be who you are and it not be judged, but knowing how to communicate what it is that you need, what it is that you're feeling. And then, of course, at work, it's a matter of, you know, maybe both at work and at home. It's sort of that saying where it's like a closed mouth doesn't get fed. It's like, okay, if you're not expressing what you feel, it's hard for people to even get to know you. So it's possible that there's even a golden nugget in your emotions that help you understand who you are and does the same for helping other people get to know you. And I feel like the more that people dig into their emotions, dig into their frustrations, the more that they begin to maybe even grow into that space of less impulsive, more empowered, where they can truly be who they are and not regret some of their actions and reactions, because I know that's been me as well. And I'm sure it's everybody else that's just listen here. Like, we're not perfect, and we're not even talking about being perfect. We're talking about how do we reel it in? How do we reel it in a healthy way, though, so that we're not sitting there covering up our emotions, but really knowing that there is pressure that comes with just living life, with being a mom, with being, a boss, those of us that have businesses plus a 9-to-5, plus, whatever, plus, it's like there's so much that can go on. And it's how can we still show up? And how can we lead regardless of our emotions and actually do things to manage our emotions? So could you speak a little bit more about how and what do you recommend as far as getting a hold of even like the anger or the frustration emotions that a lot of times drains us and for some even scares us?
Yes, this is my favorite topic to teach people about because it's just so foundational, like you were saying, to developing that sense of ourselves and our own value. Because that's really what anger's main job is. It tells us when something's crossing our boundaries and when something is threatening us. And we're aware of that on a physical level. If someone physically threatens us, we get angry and we can fight. But it happens on an emotional and a mental level as well. When someone's bad opinion of us is making us feel small, anger will wake up to try and protect us from that, to protect us and say, no, I'm a valuable person and I deserve to think well of myself. And so it's so important to listen to that anger and not just push it aside. If we push it aside too long, then we don't have that defense anymore. And we stop valuing ourselves the way we need to be valued in order to be the mom, the employee, the boss, all of these roles that we play. We need that sense of self. So I really highly recommend people get in touch with their anger and become aware that anger is there to help them. I think of it, and I teach people to think of it as your anger dragon. I actually have a little stuffed animal that I call an anger dragon. I use it to teach my kid, but it's helpful for me too.
Right.
And the little anger dragon is this mental image that you have anger, and it's not just this wild monster. It's this little dragon that's like a watchdog. It's got a job to do, and its job is to protect you and keep you safe. And so when anger dragon wakes up and you feel that anger emotion, you immediately go to, oh, why am I unsafe here? What is making me feel unsafe in this situation? And how can I deal with that? How can I affirm my own worth and my own opinions in a healthy way in this situation?
I know that the healthiest way to do that is the way that we want to go. We all are so familiar with the way we don't want to do it, like the anger outburst, or even some people that get into the stress eating, they don't want to act out behaviorally. And I'm saying act out not only just as a term that's used with kids, teenagers, toddlers, but adults have ways of acting out. And it may be in the form of the anger, you storm out. The anger, you eat more. The anger, you isolate, as we brought up before. The anger, you start being passive aggressive. But it's like being able to become familiar with that anger, like you said, using your anger dragon to really be able to, in some ways, I don't know, like see the anger outside of yourself in a way with this anger dragon, so that you can, in some way, speak to the anger, and really be in a place where you can do something about it and not take it on so heavy, right? The anger dragon, I'm even thinking about how can we use the anger dragon to understand everyday life? How can we use the anger dragon to really look at all the different ways to incorporate, whether it's processing, whether it's connecting with it for the purpose of survival, or knowing that something, like there's a learning experience out of it. But how do you think people can use it in everyday life, whether it's with their children or even at work? What are some things like, how can you bring the anger dragon into different areas of your life?
I love visualization and imagining it because our emotions respond so well to imagination and story. Just think of watching a movie. You know perfectly well that it's just a flat screen, but your emotions respond like there's something really happening in front of you. So I use a lot of storytelling with myself and with my clients because it's so powerful on our emotions. So having that anger dragon is a story you tell yourself, oh, I feel angry. That's anger dragon waking up to keep me safe. Why am I not feeling safe? And then again, I tell the story that all of that energy that builds up in your body, like I clench my jaw or I feel tight muscles in my shoulders, you can feel energy in your body. And if you tell yourself that the job of that energy is to make you feel safe and that you can push it out and make a force field around yourself, and inside your little bubble, you are perfectly safe and nothing can hurt you, suddenly you've given all that anger a direction and a job to do. And as soon as you do that, it no longer is pressing on you and making you want to explode. It's got a job, it's doing its job, and then you have that moment of pause where you can be like, okay, now what do I do in this situation? So whether it's at work or at home or whatever, it's whenever those anger feelings build up in your body, just imagine them making a force field around you that keeps you safe. And then look at the situation without all of that pressure and that powerful, energetic emotion building up and being bottled up in you. You have the space to look at it without all of that, and you can come to a better conclusion of what to do next.
For some people, they may have dealt with anger issues for some time. Say that it's something that they're even working through, whether they're working it through it on their own with families, any sort of support in their local community. Some may be going to actual treatment for anger management. Can you tell us a little bit about those that have struggled and almost that have even established this pattern of going back and forth from 0 to 100? And what is it that you recommend as far as building a habit out of, whether it's using your anger dragon, using something else, but making sure that they understand some other steps that they can take to sort of start to work their way to the point where the anger dragon and that thought process and using something tangible like that could help them to maybe climb out of that habit and reestablish a new type of muscle memory of how to respond to anger or frustration or anxiety.
It's so hard to establish new habits, and it takes a lot of work. And so if it's a pattern that's been going on for a long time, I highly recommend starting with just getting familiar with the idea that anger is trying to keep you safe and trying to protect you. Because if you tell yourself, oh, every time I feel anger, I'm going to build this little bubble around me and I'm going to be calm, you're setting yourself up to fail if you've never done it before and you're in a bad habit already. Yeah. So just start with something you can do when you're calm, either, before, first thing in the morning or after you've gotten angry. Take some time for yourself and just ask yourself, oh, I was angry there, or I often get angry in this situation. Why is that? And just be curious. What is anger trying to protect me about? And I like to use an exercise called the 5 why exercise, which is very versatile, but you just keep asking yourself why. I was angry because my kid didn't eat his dinner. Well, why? Why does that make me angry? Why do I care that he ate his dinner? And you just keep going until you get to this point. It's a very cool feeling. You get to this point where it's like, oh, that makes perfect sense. And it's a very gut level reaction usually. I'm afraid he's going to die and I cannot survive his death. It's something very visceral. And when you're aware that anger dragon is showing up because you have this deep fear, all of a sudden it makes more sense. And anger isn't so scary and isn't such an enemy. You can see why it's showing up. And once you've changed that thought, that, oh, anger's showing up because it's trying to help me, it's so much easier to change the habit of how you use the anger.
Absolutely. And I think that what a lot of people don't realize is that you have to work on this consistently. It's not first of all, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing, because different things, even when you're going through that, the why, the why is different for everybody. The why may present something that's is interpreted differently for different people. So it takes time. And that's why we a lot of times tell people that it's good to have some sort of coach or a therapist to help them through this, because you don't know how much the context that you've lived in, whether it's the family culture, the environmental culture, ethnicity, and different things that may shape your why, and you may go on that why and do those 5 exercises. But I wonder if you agree that analyzing your why is necessary to do with someone of a different perspective, so that you can maybe even challenge maybe some false or some beliefs that may not be 100% accurate, if I could say it that way. What are your thoughts on that?
Definitely. And I highly recommend getting a best friend, a buddy, somebody you can talk to about these things, because that extra perspective is so helpful. And it's my favorite thing to do as a coach. Is in my coaching program, every week we workshop a different topic like this, and I just ask the questions, and my job is just to lead you through your own mind and see places that you hadn't been noticing things, and I just pull them out, and it's wonderful when people's eyes just light up. They're like, oh, that makes so much sense. Yes, you had that in you. You just didn't see it because you were too close to it. And so it's so helpful to have a coach or somebody outside who can say, whoa, you're skirting around this, but you've never said it in so many words. And then it's, oh, now I get it.
Right. I absolutely agree. And I was wondering too, I know that some people, some that may decide to go to a formal counselor, they may follow different types of treatment methods. And I was wondering, one that I've been recently looking at a little bit more, even though it's been around for, a long time, it's ACT, which stands for Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. And that basically, just for those that are listening or watching this, it's basically where you are more action-oriented in your approach to therapy. And it does stem from that cognitive behavioral therapy, where you're looking at what are you thinking and how it guides your behavior, and definitely is reminiscent of what we were talking about earlier as far as emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence, for those that don't know, it's really like your ability to recognize your emotions, recognize the emotions of others, and then use that information to then guide your reactions and your behaviors in that relationship. So I wanted to ask you, Allison, what are your thoughts about what you were just saying, in the sense of having something that you're digging into and recognizing it as so, and not holding on to it, and what's it's like the diffusion, it's like an activity that you do in ACT model that I just mentioned. And it's basically where you are looking at something from, like projecting it outward. So if you have a thought, then you're saying, okay, I recognize that I'm having the thought of whatever. Do you think that, and I'm speaking of it really plainly for our audience, but do you think that diffusion is something that helps as well with being able to sort of separate yourself from maybe even the emotion or the thought that triggered the anxiety or anger or frustration?
Yes, it's so helpful to be able to take that step back. And that's, like you already mentioned, it's a lot of why I use the animals as symbols, because it adds that layer of, oh, this isn't just me as all one big mess, all my thoughts and feelings and reactions and everything all bundled up. You can pick it apart and say, okay, this is the feeling. This is the outside trigger that triggered this feeling. This is the thought I'm thinking about the outside trigger that's affecting how I'm feeling. And you can pull those pieces apart and work with them, and it's so powerful. And so the diffusion sounds like it focuses a lot on the thoughts, which is so important as well, because thoughts and feelings feed off of each other and are so intertwined. So it's really important to be able to say, okay, what thoughts are going into this emotion, and why is this emotion showing up around me right now?
Right. And I wanted to, because, and this is just, again, I really, really feel like we've thrown out so many great nuggets for our audience here. And I just wanted to make it a little bit more personal. Could you share with us a little bit more about how you got to this place of, digging into the emotions, digging into the anger dragon, and a little bit more of some things that may even be relevant to the times that we're in with all of this stress, and bringing it around to how people can apply it, whether they have a similar story as yours, or even if it's just what a lot of people are dealing with right now to managing their emotions during this pandemic.
Sure. I love to share the story of the first time that I used this power emotion system that I developed and I teach now. I had been researching and reading, and it came together as an epiphany. Like, I woke up at 4 a.m. to nurse the baby, and I couldn't go back to sleep because all of a sudden everything made sense, and it was amazing. And so that day, we were trying to get out the door. This was pre-COVID, so we got out the door more regularly back then. And we were trying to go to church, and my toddler had lost his shoes. This is a huge deal at my house. My kids constantly lose their shoes. It drives me up the wall. And on top of that, I am horrible at getting places on time. My husband is super on time. And the one place where it causes a lot of friction is church. It's like a moral obligation to him to be on time to church, and I could not get on time to church if my life depended on it. So we're trying to get out the door for church, and the toddler has lost his shoes, and I am ready to just explode all over the place. And all of a sudden, all the things that I just come up with came. I was like, oh, this is Anger Dragon. And I made a little bubble around me, and I said, okay, what is Anger Dragon protecting me from? And it's like, my husband's going to be angry with me. The people at church are going to look at me and judge me as I walk in late, and everyone's going to dislike me, and they're not going to be friends with me anymore, and they're going to cast me out on my own, and I'm going to be eaten by wolves. That's what I drilled it down to on a visceral level. That's why I was so upset. I was terrified that I was going to die because we didn't have the shoes. And as soon as I realized that, I was safe inside my little anger bubble so I could think and realize that, then I could say, you know what? That's not going to happen, first. And secondly, I could also have the room to say, you know what? It's hard to get to church on time. This is something a lot of people struggle with. This is a hard thing. And I don't have to beat myself up over it. I can say, wow, you know what? That's hard. And I can be sympathetic to myself instead of attacking myself with my anger. And so that was the second step. Instead of turning the anger outward or inward, the second is to say, no, this really is hard. I'm struggling, and there's a good reason for that. And as soon as I accepted that fact, that there was a valid reason to think it was hard, then my whole body just relaxed. Like, all of that tension and drive was gone. And then all of a sudden it was very clear. Okay, this is the time. We want to go to church, so you're going to wear tennis shoes to church today. And they don't match your nice little suit outfit, but you're just going to wear them, and it's okay. And I was okay with that, and we got out the door. And that was completely 180 degrees different from how I would have been the day before in that same situation. Just by knowing why those emotions were showing up and accepting the message they were bringing me and having sympathy for myself in the situation I was in, suddenly I was okay. Like, it's It sounds too good to be true. I had one woman go through my free program that I do. And so I taught them how to do these steps, how to build an anger barrier, how to recognize and have sympathy for your own struggles, and how to decide what to do next. And so then I said, okay, try it and tell me about it. And she said, I was trying to read to my kids at bedtime and I had a headache. And the kids just kept getting up and asking for water and a trip to the bathroom and what have you. And I was so frustrated. So I built my little bubble. I said, wow, it's really hard to have a headache. I'm not having the great putting my kids to bed experience I wanted because I feel bad. That's sad. And I was fine. And then she said in her comment, is it supposed to be that easy? Can it really work that easily? I was like, yes, it can. It is amazing how easily it can work.
Right. And I like something that stuck out to me was even thinking about, again, what stressors may be going on with people right now and just how easy it has been for people to snap. And that, I think, is what you were describing when you were saying, instead of having it go outward, or even, like you said, not having it come inward as well, to where you're not being kind to yourself and you're beating yourself up and all of that. And it's like a couple things that I wanted to recommend to people that may be, beating up on themselves. And that is, as I always say, the ability to use loving kindness towards yourself. And whether that's in a form of a mindfulness exercise or in just the ability to have to, extend grace to yourself just as you would to other people. When you give people the benefit of the doubt that they did something and they messed up and you're like, okay, well, I guess it's okay because, no one's perfect. But to even say that to yourself, don't bring it inward and harbor it in, because like we said, either way, it either starts to seep through or then becomes to where it's more in your reaction and it's sort of pushed outward. And so, like, even when you are taking that moment, like you said, to picture and envision the anger dragon, or picture and envision, something else. For some people, it may be a rock. For some people, it may be a flower. Whatever it is that you feel that you can have some sort of peace with, that you say is the anger dragon, so that you can stop and not trigger yourself, but stop and say, well, how can I be more understanding? What could I do with this information? Because a lot of people these days, at least from what I've been hearing from clients and patients alike, is the vulnerability to snapping and not having those tools. But like you said, even if you give yourself that space and time to reassess what's going on, it absolutely could be that easy. And for some people, it may be more challenging and they have to work on it. But ultimately, it does yield the same result, right?
Absolutely. And yes, not every situation will be that easy, even for someone that it comes easily to. That was great that it was that easy for her that time. But there are definitely times when I, as the one who came up with this method, am still struggling and snapping without meaning to. And then I'm like, oh man, I have tools for that, but I didn't do it that time. And that's just being
we all do that, right? Like, we have all the tools, just like, being stressed out, it's like, yeah, you talk about it. Yes, you practice it. But like you said, every now and then it's that random trigger that you didn't consider. And then again, that's where the practicing and extending grace to yourself and being kind to yourself comes in, because it's like there's no way for you to ultimately know how you'll react to every situation, every trigger, even know what are all of your triggers. It's really like a take each day at a time sort of deal, right? Like, you have to just try it out as much as you can, so that then it becomes more of a habit. And again, even with that habit, extending grace that you're not perfect and it's a new day. You got to try again, right?
Yes, totally. Because we're human. We're not going to do it perfectly, and that's okay. There's room for us to keep trying again. In the Power Emotion system, I call that extending sympathy to yourself and recognizing that you're in a hard situation and actually accepting that there's a reason that it's hard right now. I call that step sadness. We have anger dragon who's trying to protect us, and then we have sadness as a teddy bear, and it just wants to cuddle us and say, you know what? That's really hard, and I'm sorry you're suffering and having a hard time, and you snapped when you didn't mean to, and you feel guilty, and you haven't eaten, and you're tired. All of this, and you haven't left the house in 3 months because of COVID, and this is hard. And too often, we have this idea that part of being emotionally strong is, I haven't left the house in 3 months, but I have a house, so I should be grateful and I should be happy and I shouldn't be upset. And it's so important to say, you know what? Yes, you are very lucky. Yes, I'm grateful for all the good things. And it's also hard. And it's okay for it to be hard. And it's okay to be sad that it's hard. And that sadness itself is healing. When we feel that sorrow, that grief, that this life is not the way we wanted it to be, whether that's just that the toddler didn't find his shoes, and so it's not the getting out the door we wanted it to be, or it's that this entire school year is not going the way we wanted it to go.
Right.
That sadness can help us heal.
And I really like that you addressed, and something that came up to me was even thinking about those that are alone during this time. Those that are not only alone because they are going through this pandemic and they live alone, whether they have friends or family that lived in the neighborhood or, across the country or across the world, but even those that are having to stay in more, and maybe they don't have someone that they live with and they live alone and also have to purposely stay in and self-quarantine. I really like that you said it really is okay to feel what you feel. Yes, it may not be the worst situation, but it is also important to acknowledge what is feeling like the worst situation in that moment, because that's all we have, moment to moment, of how we feel, how we interpret it. And because there is so much that is unknown and that is always changing, and it's, depending on how often you watch the news, that's, a consistent possible trigger, but really knowing that it's okay. And either way, still deal with those feelings, still deal with those emotions, because they're valid, because you're feeling them. And no one can take that from you. And being able to honor those feelings, regardless, I think is just as important as when you do give yourself perspective and say, yes, some people may be going through, crazier times or crazier situations. And it's like, it's good to have both, because you don't want to continue to dismiss your feelings, because as Allison has been telling us, and as I know personally and through work that I do with my clients and patients, is that it is even another well for you to dig yourself out of when you are consistently muzzling your feelings. Like, they truly are there for a reason. And that's why we say, what are those golden nuggets in those emotions? And so, I really want to encourage people to continue to monitor and mind not only their mental health, but continue to mind their emotions, because they do tell you something. Just like if you were to have a pain, that pain tells you that something hurts. And I know that Allison talks about that a lot, as far as making sure that you are recognizing it and paying attention to it, because it does mean something. And again, for our ladies that are out there that are even maybe struggling, I know that was something too that you brought up, Allison, as far as school and the craziness that people are going through right now, whether it's preschool, kindergarten on up. What are some of the things that maybe you recommend that parents can do as maybe even like prevention? Like, they may have the anger dragon for when they're processing the emotion that has already come up. But what are some things that the parents can do, male or female parents can do, to really try to get ahead of the game with their emotions? What are some things that they can do in advance of the emotion that may brew for them?
I think that taking time for your emotions is so important, because there's some emotional responses that are so powerful and overwhelming that we choose not to have them around our kids, especially if we haven't been doing this before. Your anger and your sadness and your fear, when you suddenly say, okay, come and give me your golden nuggets, they can be really overwhelming at first. And so definitely you'll want to plan to take some time for yourself. Personally, I love the shower. That's my main place for dealing with big emotions, because it drowns me out. I'm uninterrupted for a few minutes.
And I know that even my sister, she was telling me the other day, the shower is good, going in the bathroom sometime, having time for yourself to just let it out. I know that I've recently begun journaling. I have done it from time to time. And what I really love about it is the ability to do the brain dump of it all. You know, like attending to your emotions can sometimes just be recognizing what you're feeling in that moment, you know, and some other things that people may consider doing for giving time to their emotions may be, you know, talking about it, processing it with someone, and having someone that can be objective to, you know, vent it out, but also process it. It's not just about the dumping of it, but it's processing it and coming to understand why, you know, you think what you think, why, or not think what you think, but thinking about how you feel. And sometimes even, like you said, in the shower is actually a good place for when you're just mulling over your feelings, right? Just so that you can allow yourself to recognize that this is what I feel, because that is another great way to prevent yourself from holding on to it, as well as not taking it out on anybody, right? So, Allison, before we go, I just wanted to ask if there are any last words or recommendations or just tidbits that you want to recommend to our listeners, as well as sharing how they can get a hold of you. And lastly, something that if you have anything going on that they can check out, you know, definitely feel free. Let us know.
Thanks. Yes, to sum up, I think what I would love for everyone in the world to know is, like I started with, the emotions are not the problem. Our emotions are our allies in helping us deal with hard situations. And because we have powerful emotions and powerful brains, powerful bodies, we are powerful beings in all these levels, and we can deal with these hard things. And the world is so hard in so many ways right now, and we need to acknowledge that and have sympathy for ourselves and realize that we can handle it. We don't have to be overwhelmed or give up, because we have what we need, and our emotions are a big piece of that. When I learned that how to use my emotions to help me, suddenly a ton of my fears that I was like, I can't even think about something like that happening, were no longer as scary, because yes, it would be horrible if I, got in an accident and lost my eyesight, was one example. But I know that it's something that can be dealt with, and that my emotions are there to help me deal with it instead of being afraid of my emotional response. So that is my biggest takeaway. We are powerful. Our power emotions are there to help us, and we can do these hard things that we need to do right now. We can find the peace in that.
For sure. And how can we get a hold of you, and what's coming on the horizon for you in Power Emotions?
I do a free program that I call How to Train Your Anger Dragon, which I love to share with people, just the basics of what I mentioned on this podcast, of how to understand what anger's trying to do for you and use it in a way that doesn't hurt other people. And I do that every few months. So the next one will be October 12th. And that I do in my free Facebook group, which is called Power Emotions. And so you can, if you're on Facebook, head over there to get in touch with me, join the group. You can message me on Facebook, and I'm very active. I will be responding to you if this is something that you want to learn more about, I would love to share it with you. So the next program will be in October, but the group is still active. I share tidbits about emotional intelligence every day, so you can come on over now and learn more about how Power Emotions can help you.
All right. Well, you heard it from the lady, Miss Allison Polson Brown, founder of Power Emotions. And if you have any questions, would like to be a guest, would like to get in touch with Miss Allison and maybe forgot, how, that you can always go ahead and email us at www.officialspconsultinggroup.com. Again, that is www.officialspconsultinggroup.com. And this, again, ladies and gentlemen, has been another episode of The Pop by yours truly, Dr. Turan. Until next time, and as usual, you guys be safe and take care.